The views expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of SAUGA960 AM or its management.
Live from Toronto to the world.
Josh!
This is Josh Holiday Live. Talk that rocks.
The public needs to be informed.
Josh might surprise us.
Got an opinion? Dial 647-6YO-JOSH.
When you hear him, you're like, what?
Josh Holiday Live starts now.
Yes, hello. Another Friday, another Josh Holiday Live. If you're listening now and the date is the 25th of March, just after 3, you are indeed catching this show live, which means you can get in touch with us. 647-6YO-JOSH. 647-696-5674. Busy show today. A little bit later, I'm going to talk about something somewhat related to the trucker protest, the so-called Freedom Convoy, spelt with a D-U-M-B. I criticized that movement a lot. It was a bunch of dumbos, but something good actually came out of that. It forced the sensible people of this country to come together and say, you know what, enough of this nonsense. Let's get to the business of helping the people of Canada. We're going to talk about that later, and we will welcome your phone calls talking about the Liberals teaming up with the NDP. It's not a coalition, as a lot of these dum-dums will tell you, but we will talk about that later. We're also going to talk about the Leafs. The trade deadline came and went, and the team is essentially set for the playoffs. And we're going to talk about that and have a guest coming along, Jacob Goldback. Do I say Goldback or Goldbach? I think you're muted. I think you have to unmute yourself. There we go.
Yeah, it's Goldback.
Goldback. Okay.
So you were spot on.
Yeah, and you're hosting a show called The Swing at the same time, but on Mondays with Brandon, right?
Yeah, that is correct.
And this show covers not just your typical sports, your hockeys, your basketball, but a bit broader focus. Yes.
Well, one thing that Brandon and I really put a point of emphasis on is we talk a lot about the teams that the station SAUGA960 airs, just because, you know, whether it's the Mississauga Steelheads or the CEBL, there's a lot of great sports being broadcasted, and we just feel like it doesn't get talked enough in other markets. So we have a lot of fun talking about those sports, and we usually have a lot of great guests on too.
Well, yeah, the access is good because we run the sports, so it makes sense to have additional content. I should mention you are behind Master Control today at the state-of-the-art SAUGA960 studios. I imagine
I am, yeah, and it's been that way now for a while.
Yeah, it's magical. I haven't been there for a while, but I remember it was the latest technology.
Only the finest.
Only the finest technology there. This is interesting because you're pretty fresh out of the broadcasting school. I'm an old geese. Do you watch any television dating shows? You're allowed to say no because it's an anomaly.
I would say the extent, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this show, the extent to which I watch those type of like reality TV shows is too hot to handle on Netflix, and that's just because my girlfriend kind of put me on it, and it's, you know, it could be kind of addicting. I don't know if you count that as a dating show, but
no, it is. I thought you were going to say my girlfriend's on it. I was like, well, no, that's not good. Yeah, I've talked about this before, but I'm hopelessly addicted to those dating shows, and I think counter to your situation, it's because I don't have a girlfriend that I'm so addicted. I have to get my romance vicariously through these assorted shows. I saw this week that not only is Too Hot to Handle coming back, getting renewed, Netflix is basically re-up pretty much every dating show on its platform. Indian Matchmaker, which is kind of cool. Love is Blind, I believe probably the most popular one on there. But they've renewed a whole bunch of them. And Too Hot to Handle, for people listening who have actual things to do in their life, aside from watching Netflix dating shows. That one's where they put all these hot people, essentially, hot guys and ladies, together in one place for the purpose of getting to know each other. But they can't have physical contact, otherwise they get punished for it. So it's kind of like they amp them up, try and get them all hot and horny, and tell them, you can't touch, no touching. Have I described that correctly?
Yeah, pretty much. And the other thing too is they put them through these like exercises, these like workshops, quote unquote, where they're basically touching each other. And to your point, it kind of riles them up a bit. Like there's one I remember where they were like painting with their hands, and you were supposed to paint on the other person's body. But then, they're doing all this, hand touchy stuff, but then they can't do anything else afterwards. And it just seems, and then also the other thing is, they all share the same bathrooms, they share the same beds. So they're always all together in, they're watching each other change in like close contact, but they can't actually do anything.
I wonder if there's a anywhere in that place where they can. I imagine that if they're on the toilet having a poop or something, there's no people, no cameras there. Because if you were a guy contestant on there and you actually thought, I can win this, all you would have to do really is take care of business in private, and that would get rid of that urge, that drive, that sexual drive. Rather quickly, but yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that, because there's I think I've seen 2 or 3 of the guys partook in a little bit of self pleasure
together
in the shower.
Oh wow!
And they got caught for it, and I don't know. Obviously, they must have some kind of camera in the shower.
Wow.
I'm guessing they would have in the bathroom too, because you're right. I mean, that just seems like such an obvious loophole. But they seem to have cameras basically everywhere.
Well, they maybe they have a camera there, but they don't air the footage of the toilet.
Oh, no.
The toilet. But yeah, that would seem like really obvious, especially for the dudes, because it is like it's like a switch. Up until that point, you're like, oh my god, I need, and then after that, you're like, okay, I don't want anything. I just want to go to sleep.
Well, yeah, it's funny. In I think the last season 2, there was one of the guys who did that in the shower. He basically described it to the other guys as a long-term investment. He's getting one out of the way now so that he won't be tempted to do anything going forward.
Yeah. And that's I think that's a pretty well-known, almost like a dating strategy. If you're going on like a first date or a second date with someone new, it's even been mentioned in pop culture. I remember there's something about Mary, Chris Elliott character, talking about, taking care of business before you go out on the date, so you're not so anxious. Speaking of dating shows, this will be a generational thing. You may have seen it in reruns. How aware are you of a television show called The Love Boat?
Oh my God, my parents have told me about it. I don't know much. I don't know like anything about it, but they've mentioned it to me a handful of times. And I know wasn't there like a big song?
Yeah. The song is great. I'm going to try and find it here while we talk. I'm going to multitask and find the theme from The Love Boat if I can. Where are you?
But yeah, so was that like the precursor to the Love Island?
No. It was an actual like drama show. But it was very, like I was a kid when I watched it. It was very like 70s style. And essentially it took place on a princess cruise. And the people there would be on this cruise. You can tell it's from the 70s by the music style.
Some funk.
Yeah. So they had a regular cast of characters, Exciting and new.
Exciting and new.
Yes, that's a love of the theme. It's a classic. So essentially it's a dramatic series, although like more comedy sitcomish than hard drama. And they'd have your regular, there's Captain Steubing and Julie, the cruise director, Isaac, the bartender, Gopher, the gopher. And it was essentially a showcase for all of these guest stars. They'd have every week new people coming on the cruise. It was an excuse to have new actors and storylines. And that was the dramatic series. So now they're coming out with a show called The Love Boat. But in this case, it's going to be a reality dating series. It's with CBS and an Australian broadcaster. It's called The Real Love Boat. Going to come to the U.S. later this year. A reality dating competition show patterned after the 1970s comedy. The cruise line's ships will serve as a setting for the new unscripted show. So you're on the
contestants have to dress like they would have back in the day.
Yeah, that would be fun. I would love to see sort of a 70s themed dating thing. It's bad timing, I think, because the cruises have taken such a beating, and you wonder if part of this dating show will involve like the Norwalk virus or people having sickness or whatever. But yeah, it's interesting. I'll probably watch it though. I've watched all the novelty ones that come along. There was one a couple of years ago called Dating in the Dark, where essentially the couples would meet they would be separated, guys and girls, and then they would meet for dates in a dark room, so they couldn't really see each other. They'd be in each other's presence, but it was pitch black, and the cameras had infrared, so you could kind of see what they were doing. So that's that. So the Leafs, as I mentioned, the trade deadline came and went, and Leafs did some things. We are going to talk about what they did and a prognosis. We're going to make our predictions for the playoff success of the Leafs going forward in just a bit. Hang around.
From Oakville Nissan, enduring a time in which we can barely find inventory. Deals are very difficult to come by. So what I'm about to tell you is super special. If you're looking at buying a used vehicle, come to Oakville Nissan and don't pay up to 6 months on approved credit. So you don't have to make a payment for up to 6 months on approved credit when you finance a used vehicle through Oakville Nissan. Something's happening here at OakvilleNissan.com.
Make waves with the Mississauga Steelheads in the 2022 OHL playoffs. Don't miss out on being part of history. Tickets are now available for round 1, starting at just $21. To purchase, visit Ticketmaster.ca or contact the Steelheads representative at 905-502-7788 today. The Mississauga Steelheads, playoff bound.
Most people don't plan to fail. They fail to plan. Let financial advisor Jeff McGilvery help you plan for today and protect for tomorrow. For over 14 years, Jeff has proudly helped people just like you achieve their financial goals and support their future with his unique 360-degree process. Jeff and his team of professionals can help you and your finances work smarter, not harder, in protecting your hard-earned money, whether it's life insurance, group insurance, living benefits, investments, or financial planning. Jeff McGilvery is the go-to guy here to help plan for your future. All you gotta do is go to AskJeff.ca, the go-to guy. That's AskJeff.ca. That's AskJeff.ca.
No radio? No problem. Stream us live on SAUGA960AM.ca.
You all know that thing you use to send text. It works for actual mouth talking.
Josh stuff, more Josh stuff, more Josh stuff.
Get in on the conversation. Punch 647-6YO-JOSH to be heard. Talk that rocks. Josh Holiday
Bill Barilko, he disappeared that summer. I'm 69. It is Josh Holiday Live. We are going to talk Toronto Maple Leafs, and we welcome your calls to talk about the team. I know everybody in this town has an opinion on the Leafs. Good, bad, ugly. We're stuck with them no matter what they do. 647-6-YO-JOSH is the telephone number. If you want just numbers, no letters, it's 647-696-5674. Jacob Goldbach back. Now I've screwed it up again. Are you there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm here.
You're here. You are co-host of a show on Mondays around the same time as this that talks sports, and I thought we would have a chat about the Maple Leafs. So we'll just summarize quickly what they did leading up to the trade deadline, which happened on Monday. The Lyubushkin trade happened a little bit further back than the trade deadline, but it's still considered kind of a gearing up for the playoffs type move. I like this one because they were able to get rid of Nick Ritchie and his contract, and it just wasn't working with him and the Leafs, and they brought in Lyubushkin, the Russian Bear, although not a great nickname for these times, so I think we'll just call him the Boosh. I like that. Yeah, he's a essentially what the Leafs didn't have on the back end, a guy who's going to knock guys away from the front of the net. He's out hitting pretty much everyone on the Leafs by at least double every game. And solid kind of stay-at-home guy, and I see a lot of potential in him. And I was actually quite excited about that pickup. The one that's got everyone talking and is sort of the big impact one, and the one that everyone sort of knows about is the Mark Giordano trade. And it seemed for weeks and weeks leading up to the deadline that his name kept coming up in relation to the Leafs, and then there was word that he actually wanted to play for the Leafs. And so it seemed like a foregone conclusion. I actually thought maybe from the Kraken that we would get Carson Soucy, who's another defenseman who has some more time on his contract, and he's similar to Bush in that he's a physical player as well. And another guy who came along from the Kraken was Colin Blackwell, and he's kind of guy you want to have around for the playoffs. Sort of like a Michael Bunting Jr. He is an energy guy, stirs it up, uses the body, and has some skill to him as well. And he's actually played some center, so he can play any position, which is a good utility guy to have on your roster. And the one thing that they didn't do, and I'm so happy about, is they didn't trade away a lot of prospects. So more specifically, Matthew Nice, who is in the system and by all accounts very close to being able to play at the very least for the Marlies, if not the Leafs. And I was worried that they would trade him because pretty much every team was asking. And this is the type of player, and I've mentioned this on the show before, that you can't really trade for them when they're in their prime. You look at some of the players we've picked up who used to be those types, like your Wayne Simmons, your Kyle Cliffords. It's hard to get those guys when they're in their early to mid 20s, when they're at their peak. So you got to keep them in your system and not lose them. And I'm really glad that we hung on to him. And should also mention that as part of the trade deadline, we also got rid of just some contract space. So there's a couple of spots left on the limit. The number of contracts you can have on the roster is limited, and we have 2 spots open, and a lot of people speculating that maybe Matthew Nice or Nick Abruzzi will get brought in to maybe get some games down the stretch. Maybe if things go well in the playoffs, they'll get caught up. And I guess the one thing that wasn't really addressed at the deadline was goaltending. And I think the team is probably going to live or die in the playoffs based on their goaltending. There wasn't a lot out there, and so it's kind of throw your cards on the table and see what happens. What do you think of the Leafs trade deadline, Jacob?
I think it was great. Like you said, I think a lot of the fan base was disappointed because there was a lot of people who wanted them to upgrade at goaltending, but aside from Marc-Andre Fleury, there wasn't much out there. And even Fleury, I don't know if he's an upgrade over a healthy Jack Campbell. I don't even know if he's an upgrade over Erik Källgren at this point. When you look at the moves that other teams made for defensemen, obviously, you had Florida giving up a first-round pick for Ben Sherrod of the Montreal Canadiens, and you had Boston giving up a first and a couple of seconds for Hampus Lindholm of the Ducks. And the Leafs and Kyle Dubas were able to go out there and only give up seconds and thirds for a defenseman of the caliber of Mark Giordano. That's really, really tidy business right there, especially after the Leafs having given up their firsts over the past few years. It was nice to see them make a significant addition without having to trade either a first or a significant prospect like Matty Nyes, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. That was I think the coup, and I I've sort of talked about this before. I don't think the Leafs are necessarily built as a playoffs team, and I think that's been the problem in the last few years. They're a great regular season team, high offense, high octane, but just not enough there's not enough a-holes on the team, and there's not enough kind of fire in their bellies. Although there's been signs lately that things may be changing. I like the idea they brought in the Boosh, because that type of physical play is contagious. And I think we've seen lately, I've seen some players who generally don't use the body starting to use it. Matthews last year started picking up his physical play, and that's happened more this year. And I think a key moment from the playoffs last year against the Montreal Canadiens, Matthews was being ragdolled behind the net by Shea Weber, and he was just smiling and kind of like, I'm not doing anything. And a lot of people thought, that's kind of funny. He's just taking it in stride. But in the playoffs, you've got to show some heart. You fight back. If you take a penalty, that's fine, but you got to show a little bit of fight in you. And so I think this year, when Matthews was actually suspended for throwing a pretty hefty cross check to the neck of was it Ristolainen, I think? No. No. It was Dahlin. Dahlin, yeah. Another Buffalonian. And so I think now maybe Matthews is ready to fight back, and I do notice that he's throwing a few more hits, and hits that matter lately. Blackwell will do that. Bunting will do that, although there's still, I think, a lack of overall toughness throughout the lineup. Like, I'm an old school hockey guy, and I would have a rule for draft, not just drafting, but for trades and everything. Any player who comes on the team must have had at least one fight, whether it's in the minors or the majors or wherever, just to show that they've got that pushback. But I think some of the pickups were good, and I think that will help. And I'm really curious to see if Matthew Nyes gets some play down the stretch. What are your thoughts? If you had to predict, how do you think this year's team will do better than last year's team, or if they will?
Well, it's unfortunate because I think over the years, as Matthews, Marner, and Nylander, as they've all gotten older and developed, the team has gotten better and better every year. And I mean, it might be wishful thinking, but I genuinely do think that this is the best team they have had in the Matthews, Marner era. The problem is their first round matchup is probably going to be really hard. And unless they can make up some significant ground against Florida, to claim that top spot in the Atlantic Division, they're likely going to be stuck facing Tampa in the first round. And Tampa hasn't had the best season, and they did lose a few pieces from their championship winning teams, but it's a team with a lot of experience. They've obviously won 2 straight cups, and all the key pieces, the Steven Stamkos, Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov, they're all still there. And it's why they're scary is the only team, they're really the only team where you look at their goaltending situation and it's it's ideal, right? Andre Vasilevsky is the best goaltender in the NHL, and that's what's going to be hard about a first round matchup with Tampa. Is on paper, I think these two teams stack up really well, and I actually think I maybe even like the Leafs a little bit better. But you have to factor in that Andre Vasilevsky will win the Lightning most likely at least a game.
Yeah,
it's hard to see them having an easy time in the first round. I think the way they've played this year, they've shown that they're capable of beating just about any team in the NHL. The problem is are they going to be able to, I worry that they might beat themselves just based on what's happened over the last 4 or 5 years.
The goaltending thing is big. And the other thing is the physicality. Tampa's a pretty physical team all the way through the lineup. Florida, in particular, is really beefed up. They've got Sam Bennett, who I thought the Leafs should have tried to get last year instead of Foligno. And he had a great playoffs for the Panthers last year and has had a pretty solid season this year. He's a center. He hits hard. He plays hard. He elevates in the playoffs. And a guy we let go, Mason Marchment, is having quite a season in Florida as well, and he's just the kind of guy you want in the playoffs. Kind of a pest, but not afraid to drop the gloves, but heavy hitter, and also has a scoring touch as well. So, I think that's the issue. Is the Leafs are pretty much going to face a really, really good team in the first round. There's no easy out. The plus is that maybe we don't see Boston in the first round or as well. I'm tired of seeing Boston. Montreal's not going to be there, so it will be interesting anyway. But I still...
The thing with Boston now is there's no more Tuukka Rask.
No.
So they're a completely different... there's no Rask and there's no more Chara. So if they were to face off against Boston, it would be a new look Bruins.
Yeah, and I think they would their odds would actually be better than probably either of the Florida teams. I'm curious to see how it goes. I still think the Leafs are underdogs for the playoffs, but I suppose we will wait and see. And I'll be curious to see what happens if they get knocked out in the first round again. I'm curious to see what happens with management. If they keep the same management and break up the core four, it'll be a really interesting thing to see. And I guess in the next couple of months, this will be an interesting team to follow for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tend to I felt this way last year in the series against Montreal. Everyone was talking about, what if they lose again? What's going to happen? It's so clearly you can see on ice, Dubas and Shanahan have built a good team that all I really want to focus on now is, what's going on, what's going to happen for the next few months and what happens in July and August and heading into next year. That obviously, we'll have to wait and see. But I just thinking about that right now when all they can do is just go out there and try to win hockey games. I just think it's foolish and it's a tough, but it is tough. It is tough just because you do have to acknowledge that they have built a pretty good team, but there's been a lot of bad luck.
Yeah,
that has prevented them from progressing past the first round.
Well, and if the goaltending is terrible in the playoffs, then that may be an excuse for, we went with the core forward. It wasn't really their fault. The goaltending faltered. One thing I do like that they've already done for next season is they've given a 2-year entry-level deal to Curtis Douglas. I went to the Marlies game a couple of weeks ago. I think it was Family Day, I think. And he's a giant. Just looking at the Marlies and anyone else on the ice, he towered over them. He's a 6'8", plays center, fights, hits, 22-year-old guy. Leafs picked him up off the not the trash heap. He was bouncing around the minors, but they saw some potential in him, and he's having a pretty solid year for a big fourth line guy. They signed him, so maybe next year he can break through on that fourth line of the Leafs and add a little bit more toughness. We'll wait and see.
anytime you get a guy who is that big, who can score, there's a good chance that they can be a dangerous player in the NHL. And yeah, I mean, based on what you've told me, he seems like your kind of player, Josh.
Yeah. I was watching, I was kind of jealous. There was, is it Jeannot on Nashville?
On Nashville, yeah. Tanner
Jeannot. He's, I was watching him play, and I hadn't really heard much about him, but he hits, he fights, he's got a scoring touch, and he's from Saskatchewan. And I thought it's like the ghost of Wendell Clark. He's a very Wendell Clarkish from the Saskatchewan, young guy. He does all the right things. I wish we had one of him, but if Douglas can keep working on his skating and work hard on improving his skill set, I think he might be a keeper for the Leafs and can add some of that to their lineup.
Hey, but I mean, I'm not, Nashville is Tanner Jeannot, but I'm not going to be complaining with Michael Bunting for $900,000 a year.
No, what a get. And people, I mean, I don't think anyone's mentioned in the last 4 months or 5 months, Zach Hyman at all. Like Bunting has essentially quieted that conversation in a major way, with his play. And yeah, what a great pickup. That was yes. If there's one move that Dubas made this year, I think that's one of the best things he's done is get Bunting here for another year at a cheap price as well. First liner at that price, not bad at all.
And just the fact that he's been, there's a legitimate case to be made that he's been better than Hyman was, which
yes.
I don't think anybody saw coming. I mean, the conversation all offseason was, how are you going to replace Zach Hyman? Well, they might have upgraded over him for about a fifth of the cost.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think statistically he's in almost every category he's ahead of Zach Hyman. And it's not like Hyman's not getting opportunity playing with one of the best in the world. So yeah, I think it was quite a get. So I'm curious to see how things shake out. And finally, we've been facing a lot of kind of middling or non-playoff teams the last little while, and this week we start hitting some of the majors. We play Florida, and I think later on we'll play Tampa. We're starting to get some matchups with teams that are right around us in the playoff hunt. So it should be some entertaining hockey down the stretch.
The thing about the Leafs is they always find a way to play down to their competition.
Yeah.
And they play up to their competition too, right? Like if you look at the teams that they've lost to over the last week or two, they had the embarrassing loss to Buffalo. They lost in overtime to Arizona, but after those two games, they shut out Dallas and they beat Carolina. It makes no sense, but for as long as I've been a Leafs fan, that's been the case for them. And that's also, that's why they play the games too, is you never know what's going to happen. But yeah, absolutely. It'll be exciting to see how they perform, especially against Florida. I think that's the one that everyone is really looking forward to because it's the first matchup of the year between these two teams. It'll be really, I'm sure they're going to go out there and, I can't guarantee they'll win, but I am pretty confident that they'll play both Florida, Tampa, Boston. I'm confident that they'll play strong against those teams. Yeah,
the Florida one I'm looking forward to because Florida will offer a test of the Leafs' physicality, and it'll also be a good measuring stick game because I know with Florida, they've had some goaltending issues on their end as well. So two teams that are pretty strong, but have questions in the between the pipes. So it'll be interesting to see. Your show is on Mondays at 3 p.m. here on Newstalk SAUGA960. It's Jacob Goldbach. Bach, yeah?
Yes, Goldbach.
Back. Okay.
Not the composer.
Yeah, Goldbach. Like your back is gold.
That's
the easy way to remember it. Yeah. You host a show on Mondays, co-host a sports show talking about all kinds of sports stuff, but focused on some of the Mississauga local sports teams as well. Check it out, and thanks for coming on the show, and I'm sure we'll chat soon.
Appreciate it, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Okay, have a good weekend.
You too.
And I'm shining a light on music and the rock stars who make it.
He just was one of those people, he stood out.
He was a magic guy. He really was a magic guy. We all have faults. He had the same amount of faults as we all had.
This was before Led Zeppelin. Robert was full on. I mean, he was Led Zeppelin without the band behind him. He had the hair, the jeans, the whole thing, and he was amazing.
The Records and Rockstars podcast, heard around the world and yours to hear wherever you get podcasts. All the episodes from JeffWoodsRadio.com.
Welcome to Sports Interaction, Canada's sports book, dedicated to giving competitive odds on the teams and sports that matter to Canadians. Hockey, football, basketball, golf, majors, whatever your sport, SIA has you covered. Get more ways to play on every sport online at Sports Interaction, including the best live in play. Canada plays at SIA. Get in the game at Sports Interaction, Canada's sports book. Brought to you by Mohawk Online in Canada. Players must be 19 years or older. Play responsibly.
Imagine having over 100 TV multi-language channels at your fingertips. Imagine having over 100 multi-language radio stations at your fingertips. Now, imagine an app that lets you watch or listen to all of this amazing entertainment whenever or wherever you want. Now, imagine it's all free. Ibaba is the reality in mobile entertainment. Download Ibaba for iOS or Android. Turn imagination into reality at Ibaba.
Grow your business online by building a digital storefront with simple e-commerce tools, supported by an e-commerce advisor. Apply for up to $2,400 in grants at canada.ca/digital-adoption. A message from the Government of Canada.
Stream us live at SAUGA960am.ca.
Something bugging you? Need to vent?
Where the is Josh?
This is your unfiltered megaphone.
When you hear him, you're like, what?
Dial 647-6-YO-JOSH now to be heard. Talk that rocks. Rocks. Josh Holiday, live.
Josh Holiday, live! Yes, it is Josh Holiday live. Taking your calls at 647-6-YO-JOSH. So, I imagine a lot of these wing nuts with the shows that are the bun to this meat are complaining about the NDP and the Liberals teaming up. And I just want to say, I've criticized them. They were idiots and morons, aplenty. Part of the truckers convoy, the Freedom DUMB convoy. But they did something great in their quest to try and unseat the government and get rid of Justin Trudeau and have their own wackadoodle control over the government. They've pushed the sensible people together. The vast majority of Canadians who want good things to happen and aren't right-wing nuts. They did something right. And if you hear someone saying, oh, it's a coalition, you can just stop listening to them there because they don't know what they're talking about. It's not a coalition. It's called a supply and confidence agreement. And essentially the parties, the NDP and the Liberals, have agreed to essentially work together on key policy areas where both parties want the same medium-term outcome. And most Canadians, I will say. Talked about this a few weeks ago, the happiness index, and how 8 or 9 of the top 10 happiest countries in the world are Nordic countries, countries that you would describe as fairly, essentially democratic socialist countries. Your Swedens, your Norways, your Finlands, that have great health care, take care of their people. And Canada had fallen out of the list, and I think a part of it is being the hat to the poop show that's happening south of the border. So this is not a coalition. much as the right wingers will try and say. And the key policy areas that this partnership wants to focus on is climate change, healthcare spending, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, economic growth, and efforts to make life more affordable. So a lot of things that most people can get behind. Essentially, the deal only requires the NDP to vote in support of the government on confidence votes and budgetary matters such as implementation of legislation and money bills. It's not a full coalition where NDP would join the Liberals with seats and all those types of things. It's essentially just a stabilization effort, a way to get away from the nonsense of your Candace Bergens or your Pierre Poilievre type nonsense. Sit back till 2025. The adults are in charge. And on a day-to-day basis, the statement from the Prime Minister's office says that in order to make the deal work, the NDP has agreed not to move a vote of non-confidence in government or to vote in favor of one should it be introduced by another party. Parties also agreed to expedite bills through the House of Commons, with the NDP promising to support a limited number of programming motions to pass legislation that both parties agree to. So what does this mean? We did mention the areas that they want to partner up together for and make things better. Health is the big one. They want to try and introduce a new dental care program, which is great because it's just very strange that dental is considered separate from other medical things. It's all part of the same body, and a lot of issues that happen with teeth and with the mouth have an effect on other parts of the body, and it should have been all in one. So that's great. They're working towards a universal national pharmacare program. Already, we're pretty lucky to have reasonable drug prices here in Canada, but having a universal pharmacare program is also a good thing. Want to shore up provincial healthcare systems by hiring more doctors, nurses, mental health practitioners. That's a good thing. And they also want to create a safe long-term care act to address funding and policy shortcomings that we saw during the COVID pandemic. Affordability is another category they want to work on. They want to ensure an early learning and childcare act. They want to make sure that there's funding provided for better education, and also want to work on affordability of housing. So there's going to be more credits towards Canada Housing Benefit. And climate change, that's a big one. It's gotten stalled out in the States, and there's still idiots. There's a guy who sometimes on this radio show, I think Tony Heller is his climate denial name, and spouts all sorts of nonsense that's just garbage disinformation, and it's in line with a lot of the right wingers in the States. But here in Canada, we are actually going to try and get something done as part of the climate change commitment, a commitment to phasing out the federal government support for the fossil fuel sector starting in 2022, and trying to find a way to get to net zero by 2050, and also a clean jobs training center to support retraining for people who might be displaced from the fossil fuel industry. Labor is another category. They want to make sure that every federally regulated worker gets 10 days of paid sick leave every year. Reconciliation is a commitment to continue to funding First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities to essentially undertake searches at the former sites of residential schools, and commitment to advance policies relating to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So important things. Tax initiatives. The partnership wants to change the taxation for financial institutions that have made huge profits during the pandemic, and a commitment to democracy. That's pretty good, especially when you look at what's happening south of the border, the lunacy that's happening there. Part of their plan for democracy includes a commitment to work with elections Canada to expand voter participation, which could include expanding election day to 3 days of voting, change to election rules to allow people to vote at any polling place within their electoral district, and improvements to mail-in ballots so voters are not disenfranchised. So those are some of the key points of this new partnership, and I think it's hard to argue against them. You know, you'll get your right-wing nuts arguing against it, and the one thing that happened this week is a lot of Canadian conservatives and People's Party types are essentially sharing viewpoints from foreign politicians, and there's a couple that they shared. I'm going to bring it up here. There's three. There's a guy named Mislav Kolakosek. He's a Croatian independent who compared vaccine mandates to capital punishment. He was a candidate for a judge position, and he was not elected in Croatia. So a bit of a wingnut. Christian Terhez, Romanian, who lodged an application with the European Court of Human Rights about COVID-19 measures in Romania. Member of the Christian Democratic National Peasants Party, which has an ideology of agrarianism, Christian democracy, national conservatism, and monarchism. And the one that this week has gotten a lot of attention is this Christine Anderson, who is a member of the Alternative for Germany. This is a party, the fifth largest political party in Germany, and they're described as being against the European Union, against immigration, and described as a right-wing populist party. So I find it amazing that these so-called Canadians, conservative Canadians, would parrot the words of extreme right-wingers, thinking that might help their cause or further their agenda in tarnishing Trudeau. There's a lot of people who don't like Trudeau, but I don't know that they can necessarily say why specifically. It's just this general vote Trudeau, blah blah blah, and they'll have their memes and those types of things. It's just a fringe minority, but they're especially loud. The not so silent minority is what we might call them. So that's what happened at the national level. Liberals and NDP have formed a bit of a partnership, not a coalition. And now the speculation is what will happen on the provincial level. Because there's quite a vast majority of people who don't want Doug Ford to come into power, but as we know, the NDP and the Liberals tend to split the votes on the left side, and there's still a chance that even though Doug's approval rating is around 37%, he could still get a majority. So it's a tricky situation, and both the Liberals and NDP have said that should Doug Ford get a minority, neither one of them would support him in government. So that's a positive. But I think the key in this case is to figure out who in your district between the NDP and Liberal has a better chance of beating the Conservative candidate, because it's not quite the same as the provincial system, and feels like it's a little bit easier to get a majority for Dougie, and that would be the worst thing for Ontario. Terrible. He's done so many terrible things, and I can't imagine another few years of that disaster. I think the one thing I wish that the partnership between the NDP and the Liberals on the national level would do, they talked about elections and making elections more accessible, more fair. I think if they really want to make significant change, they would introduce ranked choice voting. We mentioned it on the show before, and it's a problem when you have more than two parties that are popular. The parties on the left, there's two parties that essentially, they're different, but they're both sort of in the same hemisphere, and people on the left tend to vote for one or the other, and the right doesn't really have that. There's a really, really fringe minority of right-wing racists who like the PPC party. But for the most part, people on the right tend to vote for the CPC, the Conservative Party of Canada. With ranked choice voting, you wouldn't have to every election vote against the candidate you don't want, which usually happens in Canadian politics. We figure out what's the best way to make sure that this person doesn't get in because they'd be a disaster. That's what we're doing now with Ford. We're trying to figure out how do we stop this incompetent nincompoop from getting another couple of years at the helm of Ontario. And on the national level, it's the same thing. Every time there's a national election, it's like, okay, we don't want this tool, this Aaron O'Toole tool, to get in, or whoever the Conservative candidate is. So we figure out, okay, what party on the left has the best chance of beating? And traditionally, it's been Liberal, and that seems to be a bit of a problem because a lot of people who might otherwise vote NDP are worried about Conservatives getting in, so they kind of begrudgingly vote for the Liberal candidate, even though they might prefer the NDP. If we had ranked choice voting, that wouldn't be an issue because you could rank your choices for who you want, and based on those rankings, the person that everyone wanted would be appointed. And I think it would be much fairer. But the problem is that when the party is in power that benefits from the current system, they're not as willing to change it. So I kind of wish maybe that the NDP had pushed a little bit on Trudeau to introduce ranked choice voting. And I hope that if the government changes here in Ontario in a couple of months, that maybe the party that comes to power or the parties that come together to run Ontario, they'll agree on ranked choice voting as well. But we will wait and see. We know Doug Ford's against it, and he even kiboshed it in some municipalities. He's an anti-democratic populist. All right, enough of me getting mad. It is Josh Holiday Live, wrapping things up here. Anytime you want to call, even when the show is not live, you can call 647-6-YO-JOSH. That's a telephone number. You can leave a voicemail there that may get played on the next show. If you have a disagreement, you think I've said something that is wrong or you disagree with vehemently, get on the telephone, let me know. And if you don't want to talk, you can text, same number, 647-6-YO-JOSH. And all the social media stuff you can get at SAUGA960am.ca. And if you want previous editions of this show, go to joshholidaylive.com. And you have yourself an excellent week. Thanks.
Turn on the lights, open the shades.
The show's over, but the conversation continues. On Twitter at Josh Holiday, on the web at joshholidaylive.com, and hear missed episodes on your favorite podcatcher. Talk that rocks. Josh Holiday Live.
Bill Baruchel, he disappeared.
Thing to use to send text. It works for actual mouth talking.
From Oakville Nissan, enjoying it.
Hang around. You all know that thing you use to send text.
Junior, he is an energy. I guess the one thing that wasn't really addressed at the deadline was goaltending.
Really tidy business right there, especially after the Leafs having given up their first opener. Because I think over the years, as Matthews, Marner, and Nylander, they've all gotten older, and Vasilevsky will win the. Clearly, you can see on ice, Dubas and Shanahan have built a good team that
at all. Like Bunting
traded over him for about.
Hold on. I mean, he was Led Zeppelin without the band behind him. He had the hair.
Okay, have a good weekend.
You too.
Yeah.
Something bugging you? Oh, yeah.